There's a moment every trader reaches, a moment when the charts stop making sense, when the strategies blur together, and when every decision feels heavier than it should. A moment when you realize that the real battle was never on the screen in front of you, but in the mind behind it. If you've ever felt overwhelmed, if you've ever hesitated when you should have acted, if you've ever taken a trade you knew you shouldn't take, then you are not alone. Every trader walks through the same fire. Every trader faces the same patterns of fear, of doubt, of impulse, of regret. But there is a way through the chaos, a way to quiet the noise, align your decisions, and take control of the only thing you ever truly could, your mind. Welcome to Mind Over Markets, a space for traders who want more than strategies, a space for traders who want mastery. In today's video, we go deep into the psychology of clarity, consistency, and the one simple structure that can transform the way you trade forever, the one-page trading plan. Take a breath. Settle in. Let's rebuild the way you see the markets from the inside out. Most traders don't fail because they lack knowledge. They fail because they lack clarity. And clarity is the rarest currency in trading. You can spend years learning indicators, studying chart patterns, or watching endless strategy videos. But as long as your mind is drowning in noise, your decisions will always feel heavy, rushed, conflicted, or uncertain. If you've ever stared at the charts and felt overwhelmed, or taken a trade that you knew wasn't part of your plan, or hesitated in the exact moment you needed to be decisive, then you already understand one profound truth. Your biggest enemy has never been the market. It has always been your mind. There is a reason why traders with the same strategy produce completely different results. A reason why two people can look at the same chart and see two completely different realities. A reason why your best trades don't come from excitement, but from stillness, from quiet, confident conviction. And that reason is simple. A trader without a simple, repeatable plan becomes a prisoner of their own psychology. Their mind becomes the plan. And the mind is the most unstable place to anchor a decision that involves risk. You already know this feeling. That moment when you enter a trade not because the setup was clear, but because you didn't want to miss out. That moment when you widen your stop loss, not because the chart justified it, but because you couldn't accept being wrong. That moment when you take another trade immediately after a loss, telling yourself you're still following your edge, but deep down, you know you're chasing. These moments don't come from your strategy. They come from your psychology, and they all stem from the same root cause. There is no structure strong enough to hold your emotions in place. Without structure, fear expands, greed expands, uncertainty expands. Your mind starts to negotiate, justify, and rationalize. You start to bend your rules, then break them, then forget you ever had them at all. This is how inconsistency happens. Not because you are undisciplined, but because discipline cannot exist in a vacuum. It must be built on top of a system simple enough to be executed and repeatable enough to become instinctive. But most traders create plans that are far too long, far too complicated, far too theoretical. Plans that exist on paper but not in reality. Plans you read once then never follow. Plans that crumble the moment emotion enters the equation. And this is why the one-page trading plan exists, not to make trading easier, but to make your psychology stronger. Because when your plan is only one page, your mind can't hide from it. You can't negotiate with it. You can't selectively forget the parts you don't like. You can't drown it under indicators, theories, or emotional impulses. One page becomes a mirror, a reflection of your true intention. Your standards, your identity as a trader. And when something fits on one page, it becomes something you can repeat day after day, week after week, trade after trade. Repeatability is what builds confidence. Repeatability is what builds discipline. Repeatability is what builds psychological resilience because your mind doesn't need complexity. It needs boundaries. It needs clarity. It needs a framework that tells it, here is what we do. Here is what we don't do. And here is what matters right now. Without that framework, the mind drifts. It imagines opportunities that aren't there. It creates danger where there is none. It mixes intuition with fear and instinct with impulse. It pulls you into trades you shouldn't take and pulls you out of trades you should hold. Inconsistency isn't a trading flaw. It's a psychological response to uncertainty. And the single greatest antidote to uncertainty is simplicity. This is why the one-page trading plan works. Because your mind can commit to one page. It can remember one page. It can follow one page. The more complex your plan is, the more your mind interprets it as optional. But the simpler your plan becomes, the more your mind treats it as law. In the next part of this video, we're going to dive into the truth behind trading inconsistency. Not just what it looks like on the charts, but what it feels like in your body, what it does to your confidence, and how a simple one-page framework rewires the way you think, the way you act, and the way you trade. This isn't about strategies. This is about psychology, the foundation beneath every winning trader. If you want to stop trading emotionally, if you want to break the cycles that keep repeating, if you want the kind of clarity that turns hesitation into conviction, then the one-page trading plan is not just a tool. It is the beginning of a new identity. And that identity starts now. Most traders believe inconsistency is a discipline problem. They look at their behavior and assume the issue is willpower. They blame themselves for not being strong enough, focused enough, or disciplined enough. But inconsistency is not a failure of discipline. It is a failure of clarity. When you look at the charts without a clear, simple plan, your mind is forced to make hundreds of micro decisions every minute. Should I enter here? Should I wait? Is this a breakout or a trap? Should I close now? Is the market reversing? Am I missing something? Your brain becomes a battlefield of competing thoughts, emotions, impulses, and fears. Every signal becomes a question. Every candle becomes a story. And in that internal noise, your confidence dissolves. No trader can be consistent when their internal world is chaotic. Think back to your worst trading days. Those days when nothing made sense, when every trade felt like a reaction instead of a choice. When you knew you weren't following your rules yet, you kept trading anyway. Those days didn't collapse because your strategy was wrong. They collapsed because your psychology had no anchor. And without an anchor, emotion fills the space that structure should occupy. Fear becomes the strategist. Greed becomes the analyst. Impatience becomes the risk manager. And ego becomes the trader. This is the real reason inconsistency exists, not because you lack discipline, but because your mind is forced to operate without a clear map. It becomes overwhelmed, overstimulated, and overreactive. Your mind doesn't fail because it is weak. It fails because it is unprotected. A trader without structure is like a ship without a compass. Every wave feels like danger. Every gust of wind feels like opportunity. And every direction feels like the right one or the wrong one, depending on how you feel in that moment. This is what emotional trading truly is. It is not irrational behavior. It is your mind doing the best it can in an environment where nothing is clearly defined. If you give the mind uncertainty, it will generate emotion. If you give the mind too many variables, it will freeze. If you give the mind conflicting signals, it will panic. If you give the mind space to interpret the market, it will interpret it through whatever emotion is strongest at the time. This is why analysis paralysis happens. This is why hesitation happens. This is why regret happens. Not because you don't know what to do, but because your mind is trying to manage too much at once. But when your plan becomes simple, when it fits on one page, everything changes. The one-page trading plan reduces cognitive load. It removes the psychological friction that causes indecision. It eliminates the mental negotiation that leads to emotional trading. It shrinks your decisions down to something your mind can manage. Instead of hundreds of variables, you focus on a handful. Instead of interpreting the market, you observe it. Instead of guessing, you execute. And instead of fighting your emotions no longer have room to interfere. This is what simplicity does. It frees your psychology. Because the mind loves clarity. The nervous system loves predictability. Confidence grows when uncertainty shrinks. Discipline grows when decisions are easy. Consistency grows when the path forward is simple. You've seen this in other areas of your life. When your environment is clean, you think more clearly. When your schedule is simple, you feel more productive. When your goals are focused, you feel more motivated. The same is true for trading. The simpler your structure becomes, the more powerful your psychology gets. This is why professional traders don't rely on complex strategies with dozens of rules. Their plans are surprisingly minimal, clear, unambiguous, repeatable, executable in seconds. A framework the mind can follow under pressure. Because trading is not a test of intelligence, it is a test of emotional stability. And emotional stability comes from structure. The one-page trading plan works because it gives your mind a framework that is small enough to remember, simple enough to repeat, and strong enough to anchor your emotions. When your plan fits on one page, you carry it with you in your mind wherever you go. You internalize it. It becomes part of your identity. It becomes the voice that guides your decisions when the market becomes loud. A one-page plan is not just a tool, it is a psychological shield. It prevents you from improvising. It stops you from reacting. It forces clarity when your emotions want chaos. It creates boundaries when fear wants freedom. It grounds you when your ego wants revenge. It restores your focus when greed wants to chase. Simplicity is not about minimalism. It is about control. Control over your decisions, control over your reactions, control over your mental state. This is the power of a one-page trading plan. It brings your psychology back into alignment. It reduces emotional volatility, and it creates a foundation that can withstand uncertainty, pressure, and loss. Because trading is not about avoiding fear. It's about creating a system that fear cannot penetrate. In the next part of this video, we will take this understanding deeper. We will break down the 4 components of the one-page trading plan, the exact structure that aligns your mind with your method, your emotions, with your actions, and your decisions with your long-term goals. The architecture of clarity begins in the next section. And once you understand it, your entire approach to trading will change forever. A trading plan is not a list of rules. It is a structure for your mind, a framework that shapes how you see the market, how you respond to uncertainty, and how you make decisions when pressure rises. Most traders try to control the market. Professional traders control themselves. And the one-page trading plan exists for only one reason to make that control possible. It is built on 4 simple sections. 4 pillars that hold your psychology steady. 4 boundaries that define your identity as a trader. And each one is designed to remove a specific psychological weakness that sabotages traders every day. Let's walk through them slowly, one by one. Every decision you make lives inside a context. But most traders ignore context completely. They zoom in on a setup, a pattern, a candle, a signal, and forget the world around it. This is how emotional trading begins, Because without context, the mind fills the space with emotion. It assumes trends where none exist. It imagines reversals based on fear. It believes breakouts based on hope. It fights the environment instead of flowing with it. But when you define market conditions on your one-page plan, you remove the psychological fog that leads to confusion. You begin by asking simple grounding questions. Is the market trending or is it ranging? Is volatility expanding or contracting? Is liquidity increasing or thinning out? Are we in a phase of strength, weakness, accumulation, or distribution? These questions don't predict the market. They prepare your mind. They tell your subconscious, this is the type of game we are playing today. And once your mind knows the game, your behavior naturally aligns with it. You take fewer trades in a choppy market. You hold longer in a clean trend. You reduce risk during uncertainty. You stop forcing opportunities when conditions are poor. Context eliminates fantasy. And fantasy is the source of emotional trading. By defining market conditions, you remove imagination from your decision-making and replace it with reality. Your psychology becomes calm. Your mind becomes anchored. And your actions become aligned with the environment instead of fighting against it. Every trader has entered a trade they shouldn't have, not because the setup wasn't clear, but because the mind convinced them otherwise. A slight touch of FOMO, a dash of impatience, a moment of excitement, a whisper of hope. Emotional entry is not a mistake. It is a pattern, a deeply human pattern. And the setup checklist exists to break that pattern. This is where you define the exact conditions that must be present before you enter a trade. 3 conditions, 4 conditions, maybe 5, but never 10, never 20, never more than your mind can remember in one breath. Your checklist might include things like a clear trend structure, a confirmed pullback, a level of interest reacting, a proper risk to reward ratio, a clean space to target. But more importantly, your checklist defines what you do not enter. No trades in the middle of a range. No trades driven by emotion. No trades chasing missed moves. No trades taken outside your setup. The psychological power of a checklist is profound. Once you write down the rules, your brain loses its ability to negotiate with them. You no longer wonder if the setup is valid. You simply check. You no longer ask whether it feels right. You confirm. And if even one condition is missing, the answer is simple: do not enter. Not because the market says so, because your identity as a trader says so. A checklist removes the psychological loopholes that emotion uses to manipulate your decisions. It turns trading from guessing into executing. And execution is where discipline lives. Fear is not an enemy. Fear is a compass. It points directly to the situations where your plan is unclear. If your risk is inconsistent, fear grows. If your position size changes based on confidence instead of system, fear grows. If your stop loss is emotional instead of structural, fear grows. Fear multiplies wherever structure is missing. That is why the one-page trading plan forces you to define your risk before you trade, not after, not during, not when you feel uncertain, but before the market ever tempts your emotions. You define your position size, you define your maximum loss, you define your stop location, you define your exit rules. And by doing that, you dissolve the emotional tension that makes trading so exhausting. You no longer ask yourself, should I cut, because the plan answers for you. You no longer wonder, should I hold, because the plan answers for you. You no longer debate whether to take profit early because the plan answers for you. When risk is defined clearly, your mind relaxes, your nervous system calms, your emotions shrink into silence, because uncertainty, the root of fear, no longer exists. Risk management is not about protecting your account, it is about protecting your psychology. Because a mind that is calm is a mind that can follow a plan. And a mind that follows a plan is a mind that becomes consistent. This final pillar is where transformation happens. Not on the charts, not in the entries, not in the indicators, but in the story you tell yourself after each trade is done. Execution is simple. Follow the plan. But review is where the real work happens. When you review your trades honestly, you turn chaos into clarity, you turn mistakes into lessons, you turn emotions into patterns, you turn reactions into awareness. A short, simple review, 3 or 4 lines, can change the entire trajectory of a trader's psychology. What did I do well? What did I violate? Was the trade aligned with my plan? What emotions were present? What will I do differently tomorrow? By reviewing your actions, you teach your mind what matters, you reinforce your identity, you build the muscle of consistency. The one-page plan becomes more than a document. It becomes a mirror. And every review reflects a clearer version of who you are becoming. Execution builds discipline. Review builds awareness. Together they build mastery. Because the true purpose of the one-page trading plan is not to create perfect trades. It is to create a consistent trader. In the next part, we will walk through real examples, the stories of traders who transformed their psychology not by adding complexity, but by embracing simplicity with the one-page plan as their foundation. Every trader has a breaking point, a moment when the pain becomes too heavy and the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Most traders quit at that moment, a few transform. And the difference between quitting and transforming is not intelligence or talent or luck. It is the presence of structure, the presence of a plan the mind can trust. Let me share with you the stories of 2 traders, not because their strategies matter, but because their psychology reflects the journey that every trader eventually faces. Daniel was the kind of trader who knew everything. He studied every system he could find. He watched every video on YouTube. He bought courses, indicators, tools, and mentorships. His charts were a museum of information. Every inch filled with signals, zones, patterns, and colors. He believed that success was hidden in complexity. He believed that if he understood more, he would fear less. If he analyzed more, he would lose less. If he gathered enough information, the market would finally make sense. But the opposite happened. The more he learned, the more confused he became. The more indicators he added, the more contradictions he saw. The deeper he went into analysis, the harder it became to act. He lived in a world of almost entering, almost exiting, almost catching moves, almost controlling his emotions. But almost is the enemy of consistency. One evening, after another day of hesitation, frustration, and exhaustion, Daniel closed his charts. He stared at his screen, a storm of tools and signals, and whispered the words he had avoided for years. I don't need more information. I need clarity. He didn't need a new strategy. He needed a new relationship with his mind. So he erased everything, deleted every indicator, removed every line, and created something he never had before: one page, one plan, one truth. He wrote down his market conditions. He wrote down his setup checklist. He defined his risk. He defined his rules. He defined his identity. And for the first time in his trading career, his mind was silent, because simplicity gave him something complexity never could permission to act. Over the next weeks, Daniel didn't trade perfectly. He didn't win every trade. He didn't suddenly become profitable, but something subtle shifted, something powerful. He stopped hesitating. He stopped overanalyzing. He stopped second-guessing. He stopped trading against himself. He finally understood consistency is not a skill. Consistency is a state of mind. and that state is born from simplicity. Maya was different from Daniel. She didn't struggle with knowledge. She struggled with emotion. Every loss felt personal. Every win made her euphoric. Every fluctuation in price felt like a reflection of her worth. She would enter trades too early because she feared missing out. She would exit too early because she feared giving back profit. She would hold too long because she feared regret. Her trades were not decisions. They were emotional storms. Maya didn't need more skill. She needed stability. She needed a foundation strong enough to hold her emotions in place, but she didn't know where to find it. Until one day her mentor asked her a question that changed everything. What would your trading look like if your emotions weren't allowed to speak? At first she didn't understand, but then she realized something profound. Her emotions had become her plan. They decided when she entered, when she exited, when she hesitated, when she panicked. She wasn't following a strategy. She was following her feelings. So Maya created her one-page trading plan, not as a set of rules, but as boundaries for her emotions. The checklist became her filter. Risk management became her shield. Review became her mirror. Slowly, quietly, gently, her emotional storms lost their power because the plan began to speak louder than her fear. She no longer asked, "Do I feel like entering?" She asked, "Does the setup meet my criteria?" She no longer wondered, "Should I close now?" She asked, "Has the plan given me an exit signal?" Her emotions didn't disappear, but they stopped being the authority. They became background noise instead of commands, and that changed everything. Maya didn't become emotionless. She became anchored, grounded, aligned, because the one-page plan didn't remove her emotions. It removed their control. Daniel and Maya had different struggles, but they found the same truth. The market does not reward knowledge. The market does not reward emotion. The market rewards clarity, and clarity is born from simplicity. Complexity feeds the ego. Simplicity feeds consistency. Complexity satisfies curiosity. Simplicity strengthens discipline. Complexity feels intelligent. Simplicity feels powerful. Because simplicity doesn't ask your mind to be brilliant. It asks your mind to be steady. And steady minds survive. Many traders think transformation happens in a big dramatic moment, a massive win, a breakthrough strategy, a sudden realization. But real transformation happens quietly, in a breath, in a pause, in a single decision. The moment a trader says enough noise, enough guessing, enough chaos. From this point forward, I follow a plan. One page, no more, no less. That single moment marks the end of psychological chaos and the beginning of identity. Because the one-page trading plan is not just a tool, it is a declaration, a turning point, a decision to stop being a reactor and start being a strategist. It is the moment a trader becomes a trader. In the next part, we bring everything together: the psychology, the structure, the transformation, and the mistakes that sabotage traders even when they have a plan. Even with a plan, even with structure, even with clarity, there are traps that every trader will face. Not because the plan is flawed, but because the mind tries to pull you back into the patterns it knows. Old habits don't disappear. They wait. They wait for moments of weakness, moments of frustration, moments of doubt. Moments when you forget who you're becoming and slip back into who you used to be. If you understand these traps before they appear, you won't fall into them. You'll recognize them. You'll breathe through them. You'll rise above them. And your psychology will evolve into something steadier than emotion and stronger than fear. These are the three mistakes that sabotage traders even when they have a one-page trading plan. And each one has a psychological solution. The first trap appears in disguise. It looks like improvement, it looks like refinement, it looks like progress, but it is really impatience wearing the mask of intelligence. You follow your plan for a few days, you lose a trade, you lose another, and suddenly your mind whispers, maybe there's a better way. Maybe you should adjust it. Maybe it needs improvement. But this is not improvement. This is fear. Fear of uncertainty, fear of discomfort, fear of letting the plan reveal the truth. A trading plan does not create consistency in days or weeks. It creates consistency through repetition, through cycles, through data, through time. Changing your plan too quickly destroys the psychological muscle of commitment. It resets your identity back to confusion. It resets your confidence back to zero. The antidote is simple. Do not change the plan during emotional seasons. Only change the plan during clarity. Only change it after data. Only change it for a reason, not a reaction. The plan is only as strong as the patience that protects it. The second trap is subtle. It whispers, I know the rules, but this time is different. I know I shouldn't enter, but this one feels right. I know I shouldn't risk more, but I'm confident. I know the plan says no, but I'll just adjust it slightly. This is not confidence. This is ego. Ego pretending to be intuition. Ego pretending to be mastery. Ego pretending to be awareness. The mind loves loopholes. It loves exceptions. It loves bending rules just enough to convince itself that it's still in control. But in trading, you are never punished for the first exception. You are punished for the habit it creates. Once you break the plan, once your mind learns that rules are negotiable, it learns that structure is optional. It learns that discipline can be bypassed when you feel like it, and that learning destroys consistency. The antidote to this trap is identity. Your plan is not a suggestion. It is a reflection of who you are. Every time you follow it, you strengthen that identity. Every time you break it, you weaken it. Professional traders don't follow rules because they are rules. They follow them because those rules define their identity. They don't trade the market. They trade themselves. The third trap is the deepest, the quietest, the most dangerous. It is the belief that execution is the most important part of trading. The truth is, this execution creates outcomes. Review creates evolution. Without review, you repeat the same emotional patterns over and over without ever noticing the roots beneath them. Without review, you don't see your progress. You don't see your blind spots. You don't see your emotional cycles. You don't see the small improvements that prove you're on the right path. Review is where wisdom forms. It is where identity solidifies. It is where the one-page trading plan becomes more than a document. It becomes a mirror that shows you not who you were yesterday, but who you are becoming tomorrow. The antidote to stagnation is reflection. 3 simple lines after each trade can change the entire course of your psychology. What did I do well? What did I violate? What emotion was present? That is enough, more than enough, because awareness is the birthplace of mastery. Now we arrive at the transformation, the moment when information becomes identity, the moment when structure becomes belief, the moment when simplicity becomes power. The one-page trading plan is not about trading. It is about becoming the kind of person who can follow a process even when emotions flare, even when uncertainty rises, even when fear whispers. This plan is about becoming someone whose actions are aligned with their intentions, someone whose decisions are grounded in clarity, someone whose identity is stronger than their impulses, because the truth is simple. You do not rise to the level of your strategy. You fall to the level of your psychology, and your psychology falls to the level of your structure. The one-page plan gives you that structure, a framework that protects your mind, a boundary that protects your discipline, a mirror that protects your awareness, a compass that protects your direction. It turns randomness into rhythm, chaos into clarity, emotion into discipline, fear into understanding, impulse into identity. When you follow a simple plan, you no longer trade in reaction. You trade in alignment. You trade in intention. You trade in truth. And that truth is this: most traders search for a better strategy. But the real breakthrough comes when you search for a better self. The one-page trading plan is not merely a tool to make you profitable. It is a tool to make you consistent. And consistency is the first step toward mastery. You don't need more indicators. You don't need more complexity. You don't need more information. You need clarity. You need simplicity. You need repeatability. You need structure. You need one page you can trust when emotions rise. One page you can follow when doubt appears. One page that protects your focus. One page that anchors your identity. One page that aligns your mind with the market and your actions with your goals. One page that turns you from a trader who hopes into a trader who knows. You don't need the perfect strategy. You need a consistent self. And that journey begins with one page. Because sometimes the entire difference between failure and transformation is the courage to decide, from this moment on, I trade with clarity. I trade with structure. I trade with one page. And when that decision becomes identity, everything else unfolds naturally: the discipline, the confidence, the emotional stability, the consistent execution, and eventually the results. Master the page, and you master yourself. Master yourself, and you master the market. If you've made it this far, you've already taken a step most traders never take. You've stepped out of the noise, the chaos, the confusion, and into a place of clarity. Because trading isn't just numbers on a chart. It isn't just entries and exits. It isn't just strategies. Trading is a psychological craft, a practice of awareness, a journey inward. And the one-page trading plan is more than a tool. It is a foundation, a mirror, a compass, a declaration of the trader you are choosing to become. If this message resonated with you, if you felt something shift inside you, or if you want to build deeper clarity and discipline, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to Mind Over Markets for more deep dives into trading psychology, identity, and the mental frameworks that lead to long-term mastery. Thank you for watching. Thank you for growing. And remember, the market does not shape you. Your mind does. Master your mind, and you master everything that follows.